right, everybody. Well, welcome to another episode of Christ and Kingdom. It's good to be with you. As always, my name is Emilio Ramos with Red Grace, and this is kind of a new format. We've kind of gone into a dark mode here and just kind of checking things out. I really like this kind of atmosphere. I think it's kind of cool, and it makes me really concentrate on what I'm talking about, my content. And just kind of relaunching the YouTube channel here, getting right back into making content for YouTube and focusing in on all sorts of things. I have a list here of things that I need to talk about with Red Grace Media, but it's good to be back. We do have a new website, so if you go to redgracemedia.com, there you're going to see a brand new website, new podcast, Christ and Kingdom, new blogs. There's, I'm blogging again. Others are going to be helping me with a blog site and things like that, just to continue to pump out articles and studies and content on theology and apologetics and culture and evangelism and things like that. So I'm really excited about that. But I'm so glad to be back because I feel a lot stronger than I was about 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I had this bout with double pneumonia, and man, that was unbelievable. But the big news is that recently here, I have transitioned out of pastoral ministry and into full-time media content, filmmaking, and other projects, conference speaking, and other things that I'm working on, as well as writing. I'm right in the middle of feverishly writing a new book, and so you can be in prayer for me in that. It's always fun, but it's always a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy. A lot of people get involved in that. The editing process can be tedious, and it's just, man. So if you've ever written a book, you ever published a book, you know how that can be. I've published with a publisher, and I have self-published, and they're both tough. Don't know exactly what I'm going to do with this book coming out, but just stay tuned. The other thing is that we just finished a film with Peter Jones, Ken Ham, and Stephen Lawson, a film that focuses on the theology and the apologetics of Peter Jones. Now, for those that don't know who Peter Jones is, Peter Jones, he's written a book called The Other Worldview. If there's one book by Peter Jones that I would tell you to go buy right away, it would be The Other Worldview by Peter Jones. He's had a huge impact on me. A dear friend of mine, Joseph, told me about Peter's writings some time ago. I jumped on it. I started reading it. I got about halfway through the book. I put it down. I went to Amazon, and in typical fashion, I bought every single book that I can get my hands on by Peter Jones. Like, I don't know, 6 or 7 books. I can't remember. But that's how prolific I thought what he was doing in The Other Worldview was, that it motivated me to go and to get all of his writings. And every single book is good. Pagans in the Pews, Oneism versus Twoism, Who's Rainbow. I mean, Peter Jones has written some great books. I also just did a conference message, a lecture for Dr. Jones's symposium, his online symposium at Truth Exchange. So make sure to go there, check that out, truthexchange.com. I don't know, you can go to their YouTube channel and whatnot, and you can watch the message I did there on the metaverse and transhumanism and futurism and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of a big focus of mine right now. But as I mentioned, transitioning out of pastoral ministry, a tough season, not the way I wanted it to go, and yet at the same time, I'm, just kind of coming out of that. For those of you out there that have ever gone through that, where you have pastored for a certain season. I've been in full-time ministry for 20 years of my life. I was on staff for a church, pastoring or something else. And I can tell you that as you transition out of the pastorate to something else, it's quite an experience, quite an emotional experience, really, because your whole existence has been just to prepare sermons and to minister in God's church and to preach and teach and counsel and shepherd and disciple, and then you're not doing that all of a sudden, and you sort of it's kind of a shock to your system. But at the same time, I am 100% confident that I'm going to continue to disseminate the kind of theology and apologetics and evangelism that I have always done. And so continuing on with Red Grace Media, it's going to be, I think we're in for some really amazing episodes here on YouTube, episodes on the Christ and Kingdom podcast. I just think there's a lot to come that's going to be really great. I'll give you just one example. If you go to the podcast, Christ and Kingdom, I did a couple podcasts with Lane Tipton on Van Til apologetics to fill in the gaps of something that I think has been missing from the church for a long time, and that is fresh material from Van Til on presuppositional apologetics. And really, this is kind of the kicker here, and that is that somebody who can develop the theology of Van Til, which is not easy to do. Lane Tipton has been doing that, and I think really Lane Tipton is the premier true Van Tilian sort of theologian proponent that is developing content that is faithful to Van Til's theology and faithful to Van Til's apologetics. And so that is exclusive content on redgracemedia.com. Make sure and listen to those episodes because they're really great. And we're really soon here, we're going to be doing a few more. Maybe by the time you see this, we are already in full swing of that. But at any rate, a lot of great things coming. The other thing is that I just delivered a message at the Ken Ham's Ark Encounter. I was there for a pastoral ministry in the midst of all what's going on in my life and just coming out of pastoral ministry. It was a tough weekend to be ministering at a pastor's conference, but the Lord was faithful. And I was able to deliver a message that was heavy on my heart for that conference. And the title of that message was The Last Gospel, focusing on Revelation chapter 14, verses 6 through 12, which there you have kind of the instance of three. Really, you could entitle it a tale of three angels, because you have three angels in that passage giving different oracles of judgment and salvation, really, because it ends with a message to the saints in their perseverance and faith in Christ. But it really begins by talking about the doctrine of the Creator. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be at Ken Ham's Ark, I better focus on something that deals with creation, the Creator. I think he would like that. But anyway, that's what I did. And I focused on the creator-creature relationship and the creator-creature distinction. And I showed how that at the end of the age, seemingly, because I definitely take that passage there to be speaking of things that are transpiring in the world, on the planet, just prior to the return of Christ. And I think the angel in the mid-heaven is kind of a signal of that. Sometimes when you see that in Revelation, the mid-heaven, oftentimes, G.K. Beale even points this out in his commentary, that a lot of times that's associated with the absolute end of everything. You know, Meredith Kline likes to talk about the absolute beginning in his theory and theology of the absolute beginning of the creation of heaven, the upper register, the realm of angels, the presently veiled dimension of heaven, and then the heavens and the earth down here in the visible cosmos. And Meredith Kline likes to talk about the absolute beginning and what he calls alpha radiation. Well, the last gospel focuses in on the absolute end, right before the return of Christ, and society apparently needs the message of creation. And Beale was helpful in this because I saw a connection going back to Acts chapter 17, and then Beale actually connected me to Acts 14, verses 13, 14, 15, those passages right there in the book of Acts where Paul is in Lystra and he's speaking to a pagan city, and he is among those who have basically lost a proper creator-creature relation distinction, and therefore have become idolatrous in the very process of that. Same thing is going to repeat in Acts chapter 17, is that we're looking at a world that is in a stage of such idolatrous cosmology that the Apostle Paul again has to go back to the doctrine of creation and essentially has to reconstruct a whole cosmology for them by giving them covenant history going all the way back to Adam, okay, before he gets anywhere near Jesus Christ and the redemption, salvation, the forgiveness of sins that he offers, and the hope of the resurrection, of course. But he does that only when he situates his message, when he situates the gospel in a proper historical framework. What is the Bible? I mean, what's the Bible? I mean, this is just the New Testament, Greek New Testament. But if you take the whole Bible, what is it? It is history. The Bible, above everything else, is history. And isn't it amazing that when you look at the literature that's being written today by many secular writers, globalist writers, today a lot of folks are talking about globalism, New World Order type of stuff, transhumanism, posthumanism, this whole thing that I've been actually focused on for quite some time. And I encourage you to go back, watch the New Apologetics episodes that I did a while back ago, and kind of refresh your memory on some of the things I did there. But as so many people are focusing on that very thing, it's amazing that most of those books, whether it's Yuval Noah Harari, whether it's Eric Schmidt, whether it's Ray Kurzweil, whether it's Yake Adali or whoever, when you look at these globalist authors, many times they begin by constructing a cosmology for the reader. Now, of course, they're approaching things from an evolutionary worldview. They're telling you, okay, let's go back to the beginning 20 billion years ago or whatever, when life supposedly began out of nothing, and then they go on and on and on about how we developed over this time period and this age and this ice age and this prehistoric period and all of that, all the way up to the basic, single cell organism and the evolution of man millions of years ago. And they are constructing for you. They're basically doing what Paul did. They're taking humanity and they're saying, okay, we need to give a message to humanity. And the message is the message of scientism, transhumanism, futurism, and all of that. But in order to do that, we first have to establish a cosmology, a view of the world that is fundamentally secular, of course, godless always, and evolutionary in its context and in its framework. It's always an evolutionary framework. So amazing that they do it. Paul does it, and I think that as we are doing more and more apologetics in the 21st century, I'm telling you right now that as I see things, when you are looking at symptoms in the culture, CRT, alternative lifestyles, everything going on with gender fluidity and whatever, the more and more you see that, the research of Peter Jones demonstrating how Eastern spirituality is coming this way, as you look out into this world, and then, break it down all the way down to the common man, the person who doesn't know anything, doesn't believe anything. They register as nuns, meaning they have, when they're asked what religion or philosophy or worldview they have, they say none, because they don't want to believe in anything anymore. We are really, truly living in post-Christian times, and what I've even called post-everything times, because even right now, among certain philosophical schools of thought, they are abandoning secularism, they are abandoning atheism, they are abandoning postmodernism, and instead they're taking up the cause of paganism and pantheism and sort of this Eastern spirituality that is very, very flexible. But there again, in order for us to properly minister to people in the 21st century, it's going to become incumbent upon us to recalibrate a proper cosmology for these people. And so as we do that today, I think front and central of what we want to do is we want to give people a proper creator, creature distinction. God and man are not the same thing. It doesn't matter what your guru tells you. It doesn't matter what they're telling you in yoga class. It doesn't matter what the talk shows are saying. It doesn't matter what they're doing in popular media and in the music industry, the entertainment industry, in the educational industry, in business models. Business models today are saturated with Eastern ways of thinking, eliminating the binary, calling for absolute monism, oneism. The universe is all that there is, and you are part of the universe, and therefore, if the universe is somewhat quasi-divine, so are you. These are the ways that they get there, and when you don't have a proper doctrine of the Creator, who He is and who you are in relationship to Him, then you are going to be fundamentally confused as to what you are, who you are, what your identity is. So, if we don't get a proper creator and creature relationship, then we won't understand a proper creator-creature distinction. And then all of a sudden, man does not know how to relate to God. He doesn't know how to relate to the world. He doesn't know how to relate to himself or herself. And so what you have is people searching for identity. I mean, this is nothing new. This has been going on from the beginning of time, almost since the fall, definitely. But people that are totally confused as to what their identity is. I remember doing I've mentioned this a couple times. I remember doing a membership meeting with a sister in the church who attended UNT, where I used to do evangelism, and part of her testimony, which was a glorious testimony, just the saving power of God in her life. But she was changing her identity every week. She didn't know whether to identify as male, identify as female. She didn't know what she was. She didn't know what would be more popular, what would be more culturally relevant at the time. I mean, just astounding that there are young people today walking around like that, and that our society has gotten to the point now where even children are having reassignment surgeries and stuff like that. How do we get there? It's not just, guys, it's not just that we're going down the Romans 1 slide. It's not just that we're descending down that Romans 1 path, but that we are doing exactly what Romans tells us in terms of the movement from exchanging God's glory to adopting paganism. First, it never begins with hedonism. It doesn't begin with barbarism. It begins first and foremost with a fundamental rejection of the Creator. And once the Creator has been exchanged, as the Apostle Paul would say, once the Creator has been exchanged, then anything can happen. At that point, nothing is out of bounds. Nothing. I mean, if you just go back to the Shema of Israel, you go back to the covenant, you go back to the Mosaic law, right? Part of the curses of the covenant is that once Israel had forsaken their God, part of the curses and the judgment of that is that they would descend to such an extent that they would engage in cannibalism. And isn't it ironic that right now in our culture, they're talking about cannibalism in a fashionable way? I forgot who it was, maybe the New York Times, who said that there's always a time for cannibalism, but can you stomach it? Many of the latest films at film festivals that really try to push the liberal envelope feature cannibalism in their films. I mean, this is a society that is absolutely going down the path of Romans 1. There's no question about that. But it begins with a breakdown in the creator-creature distinction, and therefore there's a total loss of the creator-creature relation. And therefore, for believers, for the church, we have to know who God is. We have to understand something of God's absolute transcendence. And this is something I mentioned at the conference, because I knew I was talking to pastors, and I knew that pastors, at the Ark, it was kind of a mixed bag. It's, you got evangelical people there, you got Baptists there, you've got Reformed folks there. I was really blessed and honored, actually, to be preaching there with men like Joel Beakey and others, and it was great. And indeed, it was an honor to do that. But I thought, okay, if I can tell these pastors one thing, it's going to have to be the doctrine of God. I'm going to try to make a contribution to advance the notion that God is not like us, to advance the notion that God is distinct from us, to advance the notion of God's transcendence, his immutability, his infinity, and his attributes that are all his own. Because what we have today in Christian theology, as I see it, on many levels, both practical theology, all the way up to sophisticated academic, systematic theology, and other theological disciplines, you have this consistent push to try to make God something other than in the language of Cornelius Van Til, he is the self-contained God. And when Van Til talked about the self-contained God, what he was talking about was a few doctrines. I didn't get to all of this at the Ark because some of this may have been too much and we just wouldn't have enough time. But when Van Til is speaking about the self-contained God, he is talking about a God that is, of course, aseity, so he's talking about divine aseity, and divine aseity is saying that God doesn't need anything. You can't improve upon God. There's no addition, there's no subtraction, right? God is who he is, and in that self-contained life, God is absolutely independent. He is perfect, essentially. But also, when Van Til speaks of God being the self-contained God, he's also talking about the doctrine of perichoresis. And perichoresis is very important, guys, because perichoresis is the doctrine that says that God in his essence, as he subsists in three equal eternal persons, they have this mutual, reciprocal, co-inherent existence, right? Where, in other words, they co-inhere. There's mutual sharing, and in a sense, they interpenetrate one another so that there is exhaustive personal interpenetration between the persons of the Godhead. And then Van Til's whole purpose, really, for the self-contained God is going to be to move us toward a covenantal understanding of how God, not only is there perfect life, perfect unity within the Godhead, not only is there personal coherence in the Godhead, but there's also exhaustive personal representation. And then the representational principle then becomes, in a sense, sort of the paradigm or the archetype of what happens in covenant history, as even Adam is therefore made a representative, right? First, as an image bearer, he is a representative of God, but then also as he represents humanity as a covenant head. And so I just bring that up here to say that when we're thinking about God, the Creator, too often God is humanized, and we move, in a sense, out of the realm of anthropomorphic language, and we try to bring God down to a place where he is more relatable, and some would say it's hyper-relational theology that's going on in the church today. I would agree with that to some degree, but it's this attempt to say that God and man, whether it's by God that condescends and comes down through Jesus Christ, that in that divine condescension, God essentially lowers himself to such an extent that he participates in our experience. And here's the thing, we are not talking about the hypostatic union of Christ. These words, you sling them around, right? But we're not talking about the Son, the eternal Son, assuming to himself a human nature in hypostasis. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about that there is something essential of God. There is something in his essence that becomes modal, where God enters into a new mode of being that looks very much like, not like a condescension, but looks very much like an addition, a change, a mutability, a self-willed change in God, so that God becomes, or God enters into some sort of developmental stage with man. And if you're totally lost, talking about these doctrines, immutability, aseity, perichoresis, all of these doctrines, I know that a lot of people, these concepts may be brand new. We'll go back, listen to this again if you need to. And there's a lot of good books written on this. Of course, Van Til's books. You can read Introduction to Systematic Theology. He's going to cover it there. You can read James Dozal's book, All That Is in God. I know there's controversy around that book. And I would tell you, and I don't have it here with me. I should have probably had it. Oh, yes, I do. Hold on one second. But this is a book just recently written by my friend Lane Tipton. And this is the book in our podcast we're covering this book right here. So make sure and get this book, because this book uniquely, Dr. Tipton uniquely sort of fleshes out what Van Til is doing there in terms of divine mutualism. Van Til used to speak of correlativism. That was his term. He didn't use mutualism, but he used correlativism, essentially the same thing. And that is just simply to say that God and creation never enter into a mutual, reciprocal, neither pantheistic nor panentheistic interdependence. God and man never enter into a third thing together, a tertium quid, as it has been called. If you're thinking about Karl Barth, that's one of the things mentioned in this book, is that modernism presents a path that through the Christ event, through the incarnation, right, that God in Christ literally enters modally, essentially, he enters into some sort of experience with man, where both God, essentially, the being of God, is in some sort of developmental experience, sensation with man, and that is a violation of the doctrine of immutability. And so I think, again, maybe at some point I'll prepare some statements on this and really get into notes. I just wanted to talk about what I did at the Ark Encounter, but I think all of these points are necessary to develop, get into these things, because I think maybe more than ever now, with what's going on with society, the more post-Christian it becomes, the more pagan, the more Eastern it becomes, the more pantheistic it's going to become. And just to give you one more resource, I guess it's right here in front of me, get the book by Dr. Jones. Get Peter Jones' book, The Other Worldview. And that's a book that I'm always promoting, because I think it's that foundational to really see the distinction between what people are doing in mutualistic thoughts that are really pagan. Because anytime God changes, right, if God changes, then God has become a mutable idol. And so de facto, you have embraced some form of paganism. And of course, Malachi chapter 3, verse 6, James chapter 1, verse 17, God does not change. Exodus chapter 3, I am that I am. He didn't tell Moses, I will be. He did not tell Moses, I was. He didn't tell Moses, I am becoming. He told Moses, I am. And that statement reflects that God possesses full actuality. He is pure act, as Van Til would say. Thomas Aquinas would teach that, maybe in a different way, but essentially God is full actuality. God is not becoming anything. God is not sensing anything. God is not feeling anything. Sorry, but impassibility is very important as well. We have to have a robust theology of impassibility, a robust theology of aseity. We have to have these doctrines settled in our mind, settled in our heart. And the theologians that you need to read on the doctrine of God on different points of emphasis are going to have to be people like Herman Bavinck, who is going to give you Bavinck is going to give you the personality of God. In other words, that God is infinitely personal, that he is not some impersonal static force or something like that. But you're also going to get from Turretin a very thorough treatment on perichoresis. You're going to get from Gerhardus Voss a very thorough treatment of hypostasis. You're going to get from Voss a very thorough understanding of essence and person. And that's who you should read on something like that from the Reformed Dogmatics, Gerhardus Voss. Not easy reading, but these are not easy topics either. You need, in a sense, really, really thick theology, and you need really rich and profound theologians to help you in all of this, as well as Calvin. When you think about God in his self-contained, perfect life, total aseity, absolute impassibility, complete immutability, then you believe that in that self-contained God, each hypostasis, each person, each subsistent, rather, each one of the divine persons possesses the absolute fullness of what constitutes deity. And therefore, I think Calvin, Warfield are going to develop this notion of autotheon. And then, obviously, maybe the best book ever written on autotheon is going to come from Brandon Ellis, his book on autotheon. But these are some of the foundational doctrines that we need to get ready. As a church, we need to be settled on these things in terms of who God is. And I understand debates will go on. Debates will rage on, and I understand that we'll all be fine-tuning, and we might side a little bit more here with Thomas. We might side over here a little bit more with Bavinck or with Turretin or with Hodge or with Warfield or what have you. But one thing is for sure, whatever theology we take, we have to protect, as Van Til himself would say, brothers and sisters, my friends, we have to guard and protect against all forms and all temptations of correlativism, otherwise today known as mutualism. God is not in any sort of process. The divine attributes is not God oscillating in his essence between states of being, modes of emotion, modes and states of mind. Absolutely not. These are predications upon the simple, undivided, uncommunicated essence of God. And so I guess, what a way to come back to YouTube, and what a way to come back and start off Red Grace Media and Christ in Kingdom, but to deal explicitly with the doctrine of God, because the last gospel of Revelation chapter 14 is focusing our attention once again that the immutable creator who is transcendent, absolutely other than creation, separate from the creation, and because John says in Revelation 14, 6 and 7, that God, verse 7, God created the sea and the streams of water. Some would suggest that would then sort of imply God's ongoing and providential sustaining of the world, as the springs of water are life-giving, and therefore the same from the God who made all life comes an involved God, an intimate God, a personal God, not a deistic God, not a God that is separate from us, not a God that is detached from us in the sense that he's not involved, that he's not personal, that he's so transcendent that he is unknowable. That's not God in Scripture, of course, is the transcendent God who has made himself known supremely through the person and work of Jesus Christ, through the incarnate Son of God. So I think these are rudimentary doctrinal issues that we absolutely must be solidified on. We've got to be totally settled when it comes to the issue of who is God in relationship to creation, because everything in our culture is going to tell us that the transcendent God of Christianity is gone. We're in post-Christian times now. It's all about us now. The universe is all that we need. Science has decided. Science is telling us. And the more we go deeper and deeper into the 21st century, I believe personally, you go back and listen to the New Apologetic stuff, you'll see it there. But I believe personally that the spirit of the age today, what it is saying is that the further and further we go down into the 21st century, the more and more we will see this push towards a transhumanist vision for mankind. How soon is this stuff going to happen? I don't know. We'll do a whole episode and we'll dive deeper into those kind of issues. But I just thought this would be a good place for us to begin to dive right back in now that I'm doing Red Grace Media full time. Absolutely awesome. Go to the website, take advantage of the content there. And if you want to partner with me in any future conferences or speaking engagements and things like that, having just taught on this last gospel, I also introduced a new conference we're going to be doing at the Ark later next year. Lord willing, if everything works out, we are looking to do a conference directly on subjects like transhumanism. And so I hope that you will partner with us and join us in the effort to bring solid, reformed apologetics. Always, of course, at least from my perspective, always consistently in that presuppositional vein of thought. But as I mentioned in the New Apologetics videos, with a new emphasis, a new focus, and bringing the God of Christianity and the Christian worldview to bear on a society that is increasingly pagan and is forgetting their God. And so with that, I hope that's a good first preliminary show. We'll see what we'll do for our next episode. But God bless you. It's good to see all of you. And make sure and go on to redgracemedia.com for anything else that you want to follow us on. So God bless.